everybody. Good morning. It is Halloween morning. Hope you guys are enjoying the day. I don't know how many of you are dressing up for today. This is my Halloween costume for right now, at least. I didn't think anybody could take me seriously if I was like coming out in cat ears or something. I'm a little bit of like, I guess, I'm a little feline today, so that's my costume. But anyways, on a more serious note, I suppose. So yes, so today's obviously Halloween. A lot of people are going out, but it's also kind of a marker of like, wow, we have literally 2 more months left of this year, which is kind of insane when you think about how fast things seem to move, especially with the older you get. I don't know what it is. It's like life kind of speeds by. And so for a lot of people, like 2 months left of the year, it becomes a kind of a stressful time. I mean, whether it's holidays that you're planning for and, worrying about financially, kind of getting ready for Christmas and things like that. But also kind of like what that, if you had any New Year's resolutions in the beginning of the year, it's sort of like that fear of, okay, like, what have I accomplished on that list? What have I not accomplished on that list? So it can be like a really stressful time. So today, clearly, obviously, I wanted to talk to you about stress and kind of how that, at least how I can get some comfort through scripture. So I want to focus today on Philippians 4, verse 6 through 7. And it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ." And I know that is like, it's such an easier thing said than done to really relinquish power and control over our own anxieties, our daily stresses, our wants, our desires, all these things. That is like, I mean, I think it's human nature that we want to somehow feel like we're in control, and we all realize that it's kind of an illusion. And when we talk about stress, like I want to actually share with you an interesting story, something that I experienced in my own life, and it was kind of eye-opening. So when my husband had passed, kind of the circumstances that were in and around that, unfortunately, he ended up having a pulmonary embolism, which is basically a blood clot that loosens and travels to the heart. And so he actually, once he first experienced the embolism, he went into cardiac arrest. There was a lot going on. The doctors in the trauma unit were actually able to resuscitate him. They were actually able to resuscitate his body. And he was on life support for about 5 days. And during those 5 days, we had gotten multiple prognosis and multiple examinations from neurologists, but essentially he had experienced brain death. There was such a lack of oxygen that his brain wasn't able to recover from that. So what was interesting, what I really learned about that moment was that, so prior to that incident, my husband actually had high blood pressure. They discovered it, in his mid-late 30s that he had high blood pressure. If you looked at him, he looked super healthy. He was an athlete. He did Ironmans. Like, there would be nothing that you would see in him physically that would indicate that he would have high blood pressure. So it's kind of, it was kind of strange. And then while he was in the hospital on life support, I remember asking the doctors and nurses, because I noticed his blood pressure readings were like super normal. They were like in the sweet spot of what it meant to be a healthy human being. And I asked them, I'm like, oh, are you guys giving him medication for that? And they actually said, no, we're not. It's his own body is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, the crazy thing I remember thinking about that, now I'm sure there's probably, many doctors out there that can probably explain that scientifically of why suddenly a man who prior to this incident had high blood pressure and now suddenly doesn't, although for all intents and purposes, he's doing far worse now than he did when he was, alive and coherent. And what I took from that was how powerful our mind is. So while he was, we'll say, living or, conscious and interacting and everything before that incident, he had experienced high blood pressure. The moment that his brain quite literally clicked off, turned off, his body did exactly what it was supposed to be doing. And it regulated his pressure and everything became quote unquote normal. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, wow, is there something to be said about the power of our own mind and what we could possibly how we contribute to our own stresses and anxieties, and then the physical manifestations that come out of that. So in his case, he developed high blood pressure, and it's like, to me, that really kind of shook me a little bit, because you realize how powerful your thoughts are, whether they're good or bad. They can literally change the physiology of your body. They can disrupt things. They can make make you sort of unhealthy, in the sense of now you're needing other medications to regulate things that your body naturally is kind of designed to do. And I have to think back, and yeah, my late husband was like many, New Yorkers, many people in general, but worked in kind of a high pressure job. Had a lot of clientele, a lot of demands that were put upon him usually, and it weighed on him. And that's the point of why I wanted to bring up this Philippians 4, 6 through 7 today, because I kind of feel like so many of us, this stress, this anxiety, it resides in our heads and in our hearts. And just think about physically how that impacts us. Maybe not today, but over time, cumulatively over time, how toxic having that kind of anxiety, and how God multiple times in the Bible, if you really look, if you just start to sort of search around for what God says about anxiety, what he says about being worried, and he's constantly reminding us to have faith in him, put our burdens on him, because he is the one that can deliver us from that stress. And it's like, you think about it, gosh, he knows the whole story. He's got the end. And if you go into any movie and you don't know the ending, and there's always this this anticipation of where's this going to go? And how amazing would it be if we actually understood and knew our whole life story? It would probably make things a lot easier on us. But because we don't know, and there's always the uncertainty of the unknown, we get extraordinarily stressed and afraid, and feeling like, are we going to actually be able to accomplish all the things in our life that we want to do? And so, people ask me okay, well, what do you do? And please, I am so not the guru in stress management all the time. I mean, I know that there's certain things that do work for me, but that's not, I was such a high-strung kid. You have no idea. I was very demanding of myself. I had very high expectations. I was a perfectionist to an extent. Sometimes I still am. I was super type A. So, stress was kind of like my best friend. That her and I were like bosom buddies. So one of the things that I've found that definitely works, besides really focusing on the scripture, the promises that God keeps reiterating over and over again about us giving over to him all of our stress and our worries, is, making a list. If I have certain things that I want to achieve, whether it's today, this week, this year, in a lifetime, in 5 years, whatever that is, I usually like to try to make a list, because one of the things that I've kind of felt or sort of come to the conclusion is that God still likes action. He wants our prayer, he wants our focus to be on him, but he also wants us to be someone of action. And we can't live in this little bubble of a world and not take any action towards our goal. He wants to meet us on that journey, on that road. So usually what I end up doing, I'm a big fan of to-do lists. I tend to find that they help me manage my stress, because sometimes my brain makes things so much worse than they really are. And I think about oh my gosh, I got to do this, I got to do this, and I'm not going to have time for this. And once I put it on a piece of paper and I look at it and I see oh, okay, well that's actually a manageable list of things to do. It kind of helps me gain perspective, because I think, much like my late husband, so much of our stress is just bound in our brains, and our brains, create these scenarios that honestly are usually far more worse than what's actually happening in reality. So, making a list and kind of realizing on that list, okay, what am I capable of? What steps can I take to help me achieve these goals? And then what are the things that are out of my control? Because that's also part of the equation. For anything that you want to do in life, there's the part of the equation that is it supersedes whatever you can do. And I think that's where we call upon God. That's where the miracle comes in. That's where, God's presence steps in, and he shows us where he can lead us once we're willing to take those steps. So I would say, making those lists, seeing the parts of the steps that you can actually take to be proactive in your own life, in your own sort of journey and storytelling, And then the parts that, you can hand over to God, because he does want that. I had a really beautiful conversation with someone after yesterday's live feed about, God being daddy, and how all of us yearn for that father figure that's basically there to encourage us, to support us, to bolster us up, to give us that reassurance that you can accomplish this. And I think when we always remind ourselves of that, it does make the burden a little less heavy. So I would, encourage you, if you're going through anything super stressful right now, especially as we start to tie up this year, make your list. Figure out where are the things that you can do in your own life, and then where's the part that you really have to hand over to God, and pray upon his guidance and his will too, because that's the other thing. Like, trust me, I had lots of agendas in my life. I had an agenda. I wanted to be married. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to do all these things. And God had a slightly different plan for my life. It doesn't mean it's, there were so many blessings that came out of the tragedy that I had to go through. So for that, I'm grateful, because for me, like, my biggest blessing has been my faith. And my faith has been the greatest gift that I've ever known. And I would have probably maybe not been able to have that perspective had I not gone through what I've gone through. So I have no regrets, and I'm so thankful for all of it. So, like I said, I encourage you guys, if you're going through anything right now, some stresses, make that list, be proactive in your own life, and then learn that it's okay to hand the parts of it that you cannot control, hand it over to God. See where he wants to lead you, and really pray upon that. And, hey, something as simple as going outside and taking a walk in nature. I know that, can sometimes seem a little like, ooh, it's such a girly thing to do. But I swear, sometimes just escaping for a moment of your own routine that's kind of got you spinning in circles, and stepping outside, finding a nature trail, just getting some fresh air and maybe some quiet time, whether you speak to God in your heart or in your mind or even out loud. I mean, sorry, I don't, didn't mean to swear. I do that. I probably have many conversations with God at a given day. So, just find that one-on-one time. And again, Philippians 4, 6 through 7, I just want to remind you, we'll read it one more time. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. So that is the promise that he tells us over and over again in the Bible. And I really encourage you guys today, myself included, if you're having any worries or anxieties as we go into these last couple months of the year, to really pray upon it and to hand over your fears, because God is in control, and he actually already knows the end of the story, and it's good. And our faith tells us that it's a very good story. So just have faith in that. Okay. Well, I hope you guys have a great day. Please stay safe out there. It's Halloween. People get a little nutty. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day ahead. Bye.